There comes a time in every seeker's journey when the world, once so vivid and full of promise, begins to fade into a soft and distant hum. The colors lose their sharpness, the passions lose their urgency, and the games of society begin to look like shadows cast on a wall. What once felt meaningful now feels strangely hollow, like echoes of laughter after the guests have gone home. This is the beginning of the great silence, the quiet space that opens when awareness turns inward and begins to see beyond the dream of personality. It can be deeply unsettling. You wake one morning and realize that the ambitions that once pushed you forward, success, approval, excitement, now seem irrelevant. You can still perform them, of course, like an actor repeating old lines, but inside, something has changed. The energy that fueled the performance has dissolved. You are not depressed, though it may feel like it. You are disengaging from illusion. You are witnessing the slow unraveling of everything false. The truth is not glamorous. It does not announce itself with fireworks or angels. It simply removes what is not real. For years, perhaps for lifetimes, you've been identified with the one who does, the achiever, the lover, the dreamer, the fighter. But when consciousness begins to awaken to itself, it sees that all those identities were temporary costumes. And when the mask falls, the actor stands naked before the emptiness of the stage. At first, this emptiness feels like loss. You feel as though you've lost your drive, your desire, your passion for life. But in truth, you are losing only your attachment to what was never real. The mind, conditioned to believe that meaning must be manufactured through doing, cannot understand this pause. It panics. It whispers, "Something's wrong. You're losing everything." But listen closely. That whisper comes from the part of you that is dying. The self that relied on roles, stories, and validation is dissolving, and the silence that replaces it is not a punishment. It is the return of your natural state. Imagine a river that has been dammed for years. When the dam breaks, the water does not immediately rush in perfect flow. First comes chaos, confusion, a sense of loss of structure. Yet what is happening is liberation. The river is finding its own rhythm again. So it is with awakening. You are not losing interest in life. You are losing interest in illusion. The constant chasing, the need to be entertained, to be productive, to be someone, these are all movements of the ego trying to escape stillness. But once you taste stillness, once you see that peace doesn't depend on achievement, the old ways can no longer satisfy. The awakened one begins to see the futility in the endless seeking. The pursuit of pleasure and avoidance of pain no longer have the same allure. You start noticing how much of human life is built around distraction, around trying not to feel the vast silence that lies beneath every moment. And when you can no longer distract yourself, you begin to feel that silence in its full depth. It's easy to mistake this silence for emptiness, for numbness, or even despair. But silence is not the absence of life. It is the presence of truth. It's what remains when the noise of the mind dies down. This stage, when everything external begins to lose its flavor, is not a mistake. It's a sacred stage of purification. The soul is weaning itself off its addiction to form. You are being drawn from the surface of experience into its depths, from doing into being. The mind will resist. It will try to bring you back into the game. It will tell you to fix it, to find a new passion, a new relationship, a new project. But if you can resist the urge to escape and simply rest in this loss, something remarkable happens. You begin to sense a deeper aliveness underneath the quiet, a still joy that has no object. It's not the excitement of getting what you want, it's the peace of realizing you never needed it. You start to see that you were never meant to sustain constant interest in a world built on illusion. Interest fades because truth is near. When you no longer need external meaning to feel alive, the world softens. You can appreciate it without clinging to it. This is not detachment in the cold sense. It is intimacy without ownership. The flower is more beautiful when you stop trying to possess it. The sunset is more sacred when you stop photographing it for others to see. You begin to live from presence rather than pursuit. You no longer chase joy. You become the quiet space in which joy appears and disappears. In this space, everything slows down. You realize that the universe is not something happening to you. It is something happening through you. The observer and the observed are one. And yet, this realization is often followed by confusion because society does not prepare you for peace. It prepares you for busyness, consumption, and validation. When you stop playing, people will call you distant, lazy, or uninspired, but they do not understand. You are not lazy, you are awakening. You are learning to love without attachment, to work without ambition, to live without resistance. You are learning to simply be. And as you settle deeper into being, a quiet grace begins to move through you. The very life you thought you had lost begins to return, but now it flows effortlessly, without motive, without self-centeredness. This is the paradox of awakening. You lose interest in everything, and in doing so, you rediscover the only thing that ever mattered: awareness itself. When awakening deepens, a quiet revolution unfolds within the heart. You begin to notice that every desire, no matter how noble, refined, or spiritual, carries within it the subtle assumption that something is missing. Desire whispers, there is a gap between what is and what should be. But the awakened eye begins to see through this whisper. Once, you believed that fulfillment lay just beyond the next achievement, the next adventure, the next lover, the next insight. Now you see that the chase itself was the problem. Desire was never leading you forward, it was leading you away. Away from the still perfection of the present moment. The paradox is cruel at first. You lose interest in pleasure not because you reject it, but because you finally understand it. You see that pleasure is not freedom. It is a pulse, a rise and fall, a transient ripple on the surface of the ocean. And you have grown tired of mistaking ripples for the sea. The awakened mind stands before the marketplace of life, watching others rush and bargain for meaning, career, fame, spiritual status, even enlightenment. And something inside you can no longer join the game. It's not arrogance, it's not superiority, it's exhaustion with pretending that transient things could ever satisfy an infinite soul. This is the disillusionment of desire. To be disillusioned is not to be bitter, it is to be free of illusion. But the world does not celebrate disillusionment. It celebrates passion, drive, hunger, the ceaseless forward motion of becoming. And so when you step out of that current, you seem strange, even broken. Friends may say, "You've changed. You're not as excited anymore." You nod because it's true. The fever has broken. In the fever of seeking, you burned bright and restless. Now the flame is calm, steady, without smoke. You no longer need the thrill of pursuit to feel alive. You begin to sense a subtler current moving through everything, a quiet intelligence that doesn't need to chase. Life itself begins to live you. The disillusionment of desire is not the death of beauty, it's unveiling. You start to see beauty in the simplest gestures: sunlight on wood, wind moving through leaves, the slow breath of night settling over the world. You begin to taste the sacred in the ordinary. In the old world, beauty was something to acquire or conquer. In the new awareness, beauty is simply noticed, without reaching, without grasping. And yet this stage can feel painfully empty. Because the old self thrived on wanting. Without desire, it doesn't know what to do. You may feel lost, floating, purposeless. You may even long for longing itself, for that rush of wanting something to chase. But stay still. In this apparent nothingness, the deeper pulse of existence begins to reveal itself. It's as though the universe has taken a deep breath, and for the first time, you are breathing with it. Every sound, every sensation, every silence becomes part of a single living presence. You realize that life was never asking you to conquer it, only to listen. Desire begins to dissolve, not because it's bad, but because it's no longer necessary. When you see that everything already is, the impulse to reach for more fades naturally. You no longer eat to fill the void, you eat to taste. You no longer speak to impress, you speak to share truth. You no longer love to possess, you love to dissolve. But this quiet liberation can feel, to the untrained mind, like death. Because the ego's meaning was built entirely on striving. Without striving, it asks, "Who am I?" And the answer, silence, terrifies it. Many seekers turn back here. They miss the noise, the ambition, the drama. They try to reignite the fire of desire with new goals, new identities, new missions. But for the few who dare to stay, something miraculous happens. The silence that once felt empty begins to glow. It becomes alive, warm, radiant, like sunlight seen through closed eyes. You realize that peace is not dullness, it is intensity without tension. It is life experienced without the distortion of craving. The Buddha called this the end of suffering. Alan Watts might have called it the freedom to play again. Because once you see that there is nothing to gain, life becomes a game again, not a competition, but a dance. You can still act, create, dream, and love, but now without the weight of need. You can walk through the world without being owned by it. And strangely, your presence begins to affect others. Without preaching or effort, you radiate a stillness that reminds others of something ancient within themselves, something they had forgotten. This is how awakening spreads, not through words, but through silence that speaks louder than speech. So if you find yourself losing interest in everything, take heart. You are not broken, you are being broken open. The shell of the seeker is cracking, and something vast is beginning to breathe through you. This is the moment between worlds, the death of false desire and the birth of true being. The mind cannot understand it, but the soul remembers. Stay with the silence. Soon it will begin to sing.
After desire dissolves, a strange quietness follows. It's not peace yet, not the glowing stillness you imagined, but a hollow calm, like the silence that lingers after a song ends. The first realization of awakening is luminous. It feels like truth itself has burst open inside you. But the second realization is heavier, because you begin to see the price of that truth. You begin to notice how deeply the world depends on illusion. You see people rushing through routines, arguing, chasing, striving, all in service of images that have no substance. And you remember that you too once lived inside that dream. Now you stand outside it, awake and utterly alone. This is the melancholy of awakening. It's not depression, it's clarity. It's the ache of seeing the fragile beauty of a world that doesn't know it's asleep. You walk through crowds and feel the pulse of life moving through every face, but you also feel the unconsciousness beneath it. You want to shake them awake, to tell them, "Look, can't you see it?" But you realize, gently, that you cannot wake someone who is still enjoying the dream. You stop trying to explain yourself. You stop trying to be understood. You learn to love quietly, from behind invisible eyes. There's a sacred loneliness that only the awake know,
not because they've lost connection, but because they've outgrown the need for constant noise. The chatter of the world becomes distant, like an echo fading into stillness. And yet, there's beauty in this melancholy, because this silence is not empty. It is full of life unspoken. It is the sound of the universe thinking, breathing, being. You begin to realize that your old self, the one who was desperate for belonging, validation, love, was never truly you. It was a reflection, a temporary pattern of thought, a story you told yourself to feel real. Now the story has ended, and without a story, you are neither hero nor victim. You are simply awareness itself. It feels weightless and unbearable at once. The weight of knowing is gentle but constant. You know too much to go back. You know that the things people kill and die for, money, fame, belief, are shadows on the cave wall. You see that the drama of life is necessary but no longer real. It's as if you've stepped backstage at the theater of existence. You can see the ropes, the lights, the painted scenery, and you understand that the actors truly believe their parts. You smile, because you used to believe too. But when the curtain lifts again, and you step onto the stage, you can no longer forget that you are playing. This is liberation and loneliness, because you want to share this freedom, but the language of the dream cannot describe the waking world. Words collapse under the weight of what you've seen. So you learn a new kind of communication: silence, presence, energy. You begin to notice how your calm becomes contagious, how your stillness softens others without a single word. You stop trying to convince and start allowing, because life itself is the teacher now, and you are both the student and the lesson. The gentle melancholy of awakening is also the birth of compassion, because once you've seen through the illusion, you can no longer judge anyone still caught in it. You see that everyone is doing their best to wake up, even when they're fast asleep. You see suffering not as failure, but as the soul's way of shaking itself into consciousness. Alan Watts once said, "The game of life is not a problem to be solved, but an experience to be lived." You begin to understand this not as an idea, but as an experience. There's nothing to fix anymore. There's only the endless unfolding of what already is, the laughter and the sorrow, the gain and the loss, all belonging to the same cosmic dance. Still, this understanding doesn't erase your humanity. You still feel. You still cry when someone leaves, still ache when you remember love that couldn't stay. But now, even your pain is sacred. It burns cleanly, without bitterness. It's not you who suffers anymore. It's life moving through you, expressing its infinite textures. In this awareness, even sadness becomes beautiful. Tears become a form of worship, because through them, you touch the raw pulse of being, unguarded, unfiltered, utterly real. You begin to see that awakening was never about escaping the human experience. It was about entering it fully, without armor. To see everything, feel everything, and still remain free. Freedom doesn't mean detachment. It means intimacy without fear. It means standing at the edge of joy and sorrow and realizing they're two sides of the same wave. The more awake you become, the more paradoxical life feels. You feel both everything and nothing. You want nothing, yet love everything. You are both nobody and the entire cosmos breathing through a single human form. And in this strange paradox, you find peace. Because you finally stop asking, what's the point? You see that the point was never somewhere else. It was here, in this moment, in this breath, in this awareness of being aware. The weight of knowing becomes lighter when you stop trying to carry it, when you let life carry itself. You stop trying to understand awakening and begin to embody it. No longer a seeker, no longer a knower, just the witness, silently aware of its own infinity. The melancholy softens into tenderness. You begin to smile again, not the smile of amusement, but the quiet smile of recognition. You see yourself in everything, in strangers, in trees, in the slow dance of sunlight on water, and you understand nothing was ever lost. You simply stopped pretending it could be owned. You lose interest in everything because everything has already been found. The journey was never outward, it was the spiral inward, back to the still point from which you began. And so you live, lightly, simply, quietly. You love without clinging, you walk without destination, and in your silence, existence itself begins to hum a gentle truth. There was never anything missing. There was only the forgetting of what you already are. When the illusions fall and the melancholy softens, something even more profound begins to dissolve. The idea of who you are. For most of your life, identity was your anchor. You built yourself carefully, layer by layer, from memories, achievements, beliefs, and opinions. You said, "This is me." But now, when you look for that me, you can't find it. You search through thoughts, emotions, sensations, and none of them last long enough to be called you. At first, this feels terrifying, because the self you thought you were begins to crumble, and with it goes your sense of control. You can no longer say with certainty, "I am this kind of person," or "this is what I want." The boundaries blur, the edges fade, and the ground of identity gives way to vast, open space. This is the collapse of identity, and it feels like dying. Because, in a sense, it is. The one who was chasing, the one who was seeking enlightenment, the one who wanted to be free, that person never truly existed. They were a mask worn by awareness, a dream within a dream. And now, that dream is dissolving back into the stillness from which it came. Alan Watts once said, "The real you is not a puppet which life pushes around. The real you is the whole universe." When you awaken to this, you realize that the self was a character, not the author. And the moment you stop identifying with the character, life begins to write itself through you, effortlessly, naturally, without resistance. But before this realization feels peaceful, it often feels hollow. The mind protests, "If I'm not my story, then who am I? If I don't have a purpose, then what is the point of living?" It wants to rebuild the identity, even out of spirituality. I am the awakened one. I am the observer. I am the one who knows. But even that becomes another mask, another false stability. True awakening strips even that away. You learn to stand naked in the mystery, with nothing to hold on to, not even the idea of being enlightened. It is here that the deepest silence arrives. This silence is not empty. It's alive. It's the space in which all experiences appear and disappear, the quiet observer behind thought, emotion, and form. It's not something you can become, it's what you've always been. When identity collapses, life becomes astonishingly simple. You stop needing to prove anything. You stop needing to defend your opinions or win arguments. You stop building walls around me and them. The boundaries soften into something fluid, a sense that everything is one continuous movement, breathing itself in and out. You realize that even your thoughts are not yours. They arise like clouds and dissolve on their own. You are not the thinker. You are the sky in which thinking happens. From this simplicity comes an unexpected joy, not the sharp, ecstatic joy of excitement, but a soft, luminous joy, like morning light touching still water. It doesn't depend on anything. It's not about anything. It simply is. This joy doesn't shout. It hums quietly beneath everything. It's in the breath, in the rhythm of walking.
in the heartbeat that was never under your control. It's in the realization that life doesn't need your permission to be beautiful. You begin to notice that simplicity is not boring, it's sacred. The smallest moments become profound. Pouring tea, folding clothes, watching the wind move through trees. You're not doing them to reach somewhere, you're simply doing them. This is the rebirth of simplicity. It's as if life has returned to its natural state, unforced, unhurried, innocent. You no longer need to seek meaning because everything is meaning. Existence itself becomes your meditation. You might find that people call you quiet now, or distant. But you're not distant, you're deeply present. You're no longer standing outside life, analyzing it. You're inside it, flowing with it. And that presence, that quiet attention, has its own intelligence. From this place, you begin to act, but not from fear or desire. Your actions arise like ripples from still water, spontaneous, uncalculated, effortless. You no longer decide, you respond. And your response is always in harmony with what is. This is how the universe moves when there is no someone in the way. The observer and the observed merge, and life becomes a seamless dance. You discover that simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. It's not the absence of depth, it's the absence of confusion. It's clarity without commentary. In this state, creativity flows again, not from ambition, but from joy. You may write, paint, speak, or teach, but there's no attachment to outcome. You create as flowers bloom, because it's your nature to express. And just as naturally, you let go. This is the subtle difference between awakening and the ego's version of enlightenment. The ego wants to arrive. Awareness knows there's nowhere to go. The ego seeks perfection. Awareness sees that everything is already perfect, even imperfection. When identity collapses completely, life doesn't disappear, it deepens. You find yourself laughing more easily, crying more freely, loving without fear. Because there's no longer a you trying to protect an image. You can finally rest. And in this rest, you rediscover something the seeker had forgotten. The beauty of being human. Not a saint, not a guru, just a living expression of the universe, breathing, feeling, changing. There is no longer any conflict between the divine and the mundane, between the sacred and the mundane. It's all one thing, the pulse of existence expressing itself through infinite forms. Alan Watts described it best. You are an aperture through which the universe is looking at itself. When the observer sees this, the separation dissolves. There's no longer the observer and the observed. There is only seeing, only life awake to itself. And with that realization, interest slowly returns. But it's different now. You're no longer interested in things, you're interested as life itself. You find wonder in everything because you've stopped dividing the world into sacred and profane. You've stopped asking for purpose because you've become purpose itself. This is the quiet revolution of simplicity. A return not to ignorance, but to innocence.
After the silence, after the collapse of all identities, something unexpected begins to stir. Not a new philosophy, not a mission, but a quiet impulse to live again. Not to chase, not to possess, simply to participate. Like a river that, after resting in a still pool, begins to move once more toward the sea. The awakened person doesn't return to the old world as they left it. They walk differently now, lighter, slower, without the armor of needing to prove anything. The same streets, the same faces, the same sky, but everything glows from within, as though the universe has opened its eyes through theirs. You begin to see that life was never an obstacle to enlightenment. It was the doorway to it. The market noise, the laughter of strangers, the ache of loss, the taste of bread, all of it is sacred now. You no longer divide the world into spiritual and ordinary. You see only the dance of being. This is the return. It is the moment when the wave realizes it is the ocean and yet continues to roll toward the shore. You still go to work, pay bills, wash dishes, but the one doing it has changed. There is no longer the heavy sense of "I must." There is only the quiet recognition of this too is life. Each act becomes meditation, each breath a prayer without words. You no longer avoid emotion, you allow it. If sadness comes, it's welcomed like rain. If joy comes, it's sunlight. Fleeting, beautiful, complete. You stop fighting the weather of existence and start dancing with it. In this way, awakening becomes embodiment. It moves from insight to expression. It's not enough to see truth. It must be lived through your hands, your voice, your kindness. You find yourself drawn to simplicity. Less noise, fewer possessions, deeper conversations. You discover that peace was never in the absence of activity, but in the absence of resistance. And paradoxically, the more you let go, the more life gives back. Opportunities, synchronicities, connections, they arise effortlessly because you're no longer swimming against the current. You've become the current. Alan Watts once compared it to music. The meaning of a song isn't at the end of it, it's in every note along the way. So you stop rushing toward the end. You begin to live melodically, moment by moment, breath by breath. With clarity comes compassion. You look at people still trapped in striving, and instead of judgment, you feel tenderness. You see their struggle as your own, because it was your own. You understand that every soul is waking up at its own pace, in its own rhythm. You help where you can, not from duty, but from love, because love now flows naturally, like gravity. You don't need to force it or define it, you simply are it. You realize that teaching doesn't always mean speaking. Sometimes it's listening deeply. Sometimes it's smiling quietly. Sometimes it's simply being fully present with another person's pain without needing to fix it. You discover that the most profound gift you can give is your presence. When you are fully here, the world around you starts to remember itself. The same way silence reminds music how to breathe. Life continues to offer its joys and sorrows. People still argue, governments still stumble, storms still come and go, but your relationship with it all has changed. You no longer need to control the play. You understand it was never yours to direct. You sit in the audience and the stage at once, laughing, crying, amazed at the perfection of imperfection. You may still feel moments of restlessness, of doubt, of old conditioning returning, but now you meet them as an old friend might meet another after many years, with a smile and a deep breath. Because you know they too belong to the dance. Nothing is excluded anymore. The awakened life is not about escaping duality. It's about embracing it so fully that it dissolves in your embrace. You learn that enlightenment is not a destination, but a rhythm, a continuous remembering and forgetting, a tide that flows in and out of awareness. Even when you forget, something deeper remains awake. Even when you fall back into the dream, you fall consciously. And that is enough. One day, you notice something astonishing. The same curiosity that fueled your childhood has returned. The tree, the bird, the scent of rain. They no longer seem ordinary. They are miracles again. But this time, your wonder is grounded. It's not the naive wonder of ignorance, but the wise wonder of one who knows that they know nothing. You realize that existence itself is an ongoing miracle, not a problem to be solved, but an art to be lived. You see that awakening was never about rising above life. It was about falling in love with it completely, fearlessly, eternally. You lose interest in everything that is artificial, forced, or false, and fall in love again with everything real. The sound of breath, the laughter of a friend, the endless shimmering now. You begin to live without a script. Life improvises through you. You become both the dancer and the dance, both the dreamer and the dream. In the end, awakening doesn't give you answers. It dissolves the need for them. You don't know what life is, but you no longer need to. You are what life is. The observer and the observed merge into a single, endless awareness. The universe experiencing itself through countless eyes, countless hearts. And as you sit quietly, perhaps watching the light fade over the horizon, a realization dawns, gentle, wordless, infinite. There was never anything wrong with me. There was never anything to fix. I was never separate. I was always home. You smile. Not the smile of triumph, but of peace. Because you've remembered what the soul always knew, that losing interest in everything was never the end, but the beginning of seeing everything as it truly is. Life continues. The breath goes on, and the universe keeps whispering through the wind.